Welcome to Movie Recall. In today's video, we will be going through the 2022 movie Mr. Malcolm's List. It's time to recall, let's get started, turn on subtitles, and spoilers ahead. The film starts in 1802 England, where we meet two best friends named Selina and Julia, who are spending their last night at Mrs. Finch's Ladies' Academy. Selina is implied to be the more bookish and quiet sort, while Julia seems a bit obnoxious and more into dancing in society. Julia makes Selina promise to write to her every week, while she herself might not be able to keep up such regular correspondence as she'll be too busy. She then tells Selina that once she's found a husband, she'll find one for her friend as well. They hug, promising to look out for one another and go to bed. The film now jumps to 1818, and we see a grown-up Julia getting ready with the help of her maid. The narrator then introduces us to the most popular bachelor in England at the time, Mr. Jeremy Malcolm, who does not have a title of his own, being the second son of an earl, but had been bequeathed a large sum of his aunt's fortune. This gives him £20,000 per year and makes him the target of all the single ladies London has to offer. But Mr. Malcolm has earned a reputation for being hard to impress because he is on the lookout for a bride whom he can give his heart to. He is wary of fortune diggers and devised a method of finding his ideal life partner. We see him go out to the opera with Miss Julia Thistlewhite, which earns her a lot of scorn from the other ladies because this is Julia's fourth season, meaning she was introduced to the London society 4 years ago in order to find a match but hasn't been able to. The others don't like Julia because her presence means that the younger girls have lesser chances. We then see Julia and Mr. Malcolm, who is trying to make polite conversation. Julia makes an ignorant remark about the opera, which Mr. Malcolm jokes away. He then tries to ask her opinion on the Corn Laws, which Julia clearly has no knowledge about, and fumbles her way through an answer. However, Mr. Malcolm does not make fun of her or confront her about her ignorance at all. The scene changes and we go to the countryside where Selina Dalton lives with her family. She is visited by a family friend of theirs, Mr. Woodbury, who is about her father's age. The man proposes to Selina, which she promptly declines. Offended, Mr. Woodbury tells her to reconsider as her prospects are already very bleak and his offer won't be repeated a second time. Additionally, if she accepts him, he is willing to financially help out her siblings as well. But Selina is firm on her decision and lets him out, reminding him that this is the second time he has proposed to her and been rejected. Back in London, Julia receives a letter from Selina, updating her on the latest proposal by Mr. Woodbury, while Julia's mother tells her the latest gossip. Her mother is worried about the lack of a call from Mr. Malcolm and tells her daughter not to be too upset if he rejects her, as he has quite the reputation to do so. Julia tells her not to worry while opening a second letter. In it, there's a caricature which Julia unfolds excitedly, but her face soon falls when she sees Mr. Malcolm and herself on the page with a caption that says, "Next!" Enraged and humiliated, she tries to buy all the copies of the caricature, but the damage is done. She then sends a message to her cousin Mr. Cassidy to inquire into the matter. Her butler heads off into the club where he delivers the message. Cassidy confronts Mr. Malcolm about how he's gaining a reputation for breaking hearts and ruining the dream of young ladies. Malcolm defends his decisions by saying that he won't settle for someone looking to marry the catch of the season, but he has specific requirements which he has noted down in a list which the ideal bride must fulfill. And it was point 4 which Julia failed, which was that she could uphold a sensible conversation. Cassidy thinks that this is very arrogant of him, but Malcolm is very set on his method. He also insists that he did not spurn Julia as they had only been out to the opera once, and Mr. Malcolm had not paid her any special attention as Julia claims. Cassidy takes this news to Julia the next day, who is extremely angered at the prospect of not having met the qualifications on the list. Julia then comes up with a plan that will teach Mr. Malcolm a lesson and shows Cassidy the letter written to her by Selina after she had seen the caricature in Sussex. She invites her friend to visit her in London and gets Cassidy on board as well. When Selina arrives, Julia fills her in about the situation and asks for Selina's help. Selina is naturally apprehensive about the idea and says that it sounds quite devious, but Selina insists, appealing to their long friendship, and eventually Selina agrees. With Cassidy's help, Julia is able to know all the points on Mr. Malcolm's list, and the two of them begin to train Selina to qualify. The first point of the list is that the lady should be pretty and have good posture. For this, Julia has Selina fitted for new gowns in the latest fashion with a specific emphasis on appealing necklines. According to the second point, that is, the lady should be graceful, the two cousins teach Selina the latest dances. Cassidy also gives her books on the latest subjects in accordance with the third requirement so that she can be up to date with the latest topics and such. But through their conversation, we find out that Selina is already quite knowledgeable and reveals her knowledge about the corn laws. Cassidy also instructs her not to bat her eyelashes too much at Mr. Malcolm, as these flirtatious games put off Mr. Malcolm, and the incessant eyelash fluttering was another reason why Mr. Malcolm had found Julia to be an unideal match. Julia and Cassidy plan for Selina to meet Mr. Malcolm at a party, and on the night of, Julia leaves Selina alone in the orangery so that she can prepare for introducing her to everyone. But Selina runs into Mr. Malcolm himself in the orangery, not knowing who he is, and the two of them engage in a very interesting conversation about the futility of dreams, which Selina disagrees with. Mr. Malcolm smiles at the lady and proposes they be introduced formally once she joins the dancing. Inside, Cassidy tells Malcolm about a potential prospect when Malcolm says he has one of his own and mentions meeting someone in the orangery. Cassidy is happy that they've already met and that Malcolm is interested in Selina already. He brings Selina to the party and the two are formally introduced, although Selina is very shocked to see that the interesting man she had come across is none other than Mr. Malcolm. Mr. Malcolm then asks her to accompany him tomorrow to an art gallery, and Selina agrees. The next day, Selina is subjected to whispers about Mr. Malcolm courting yet another one and points it out to Mr. Malcolm. The two of them converse where Mr. Malcolm defends himself from the allegations of being a trifler and says that he only accompanied Miss Thistlethwaite to the opera only once, where Julia has been telling everyone that he gave her marked attention. He also claims that they did not have any connection for him to further pursue her. As the two talk, we see that they clearly gel well together and have chemistry. Just then, an old friend of Mr. Malcolm comes across them called Captain Ossory. Selina and Ossory recognize each other through name as she had been the companion of his aunt during her final years, and Captain Ossory tells her that he will pay her a visit tomorrow. We also see Mr. Malcolm noting Selina's charitable act of being the old lady's companion, which ticks another point in his list. That night, Selina admits to Julia that Mr. Malcolm seems very unlike what Julia had described, while her friend mocks her for falling for Mr. Malcolm's trap and reminds her that their goal is to humiliate him. The next morning, the captain arrives and invites Selina for a stroll in the park, which she gladly accepts. Ossory expresses his thanks for everything that she did for his aunt and says that in his aunt's last letter to him, she had asked him to marry Selina. Selina is surprised to hear this, but before she can answer, they run into Mr. Malcolm. Mr. Malcolm asks Selina to accompany him to the ball next week, which Selina gladly accepts. But according to his aunt's wishes, Ossory steps in with his intention to court Selina as well and asks her for a dance at the very same ball. Overwhelmed, Selina laughs and accepts. And so begins a rivalry between the two men. Later, Selina meets up with Julia and her cousin, who informs her that she will be required to play the piano for dinner that night. This is one of the requirements of Mr. Malcolm's list, but Selina is worried as she does not know how to play. But Julia tells her not to worry as they have a plan to tackle it. That night, they have dinner with Mr. Malcolm and Captain Ossory, who have been invited by Julia's mother. Mrs. Thistlethwaite expresses her admiration for Captain Ossory's service and bravery as he explains how much death he has seen. He also asks Selina how she knows Julia, and as Selina begins to answer, Julia cuts in to reply herself, saying that they met at Mrs. Finch's academy. Selina says that she was attending due to the generosity of her father's benefactor, and while the other girls bullied her, Julia was always kind to her. This is when Mr. Malcolm drops an unexpected question on Selina, asking her views on the Church Building Act, which is generally received positively. As Julia and Cassidy eye each other in nervousness, Selina surprises them by answering Mr. Malcolm. She expresses that as a daughter of a clergyman, she believes that the act is an exorbitant use of money which could be better used to help the poor. This earns her applause from Cassidy and Mr. Malcolm's approval, who shares her views. Later on, Selina and Mr. Cassidy sit down to play a duet on the piano, but only Cassidy plays and Selina pretends to do so. As the days go by, Selina and Mr. Malcolm continue to get to know each other better, and it is very evident that Mr. Malcolm is very interested in Selina. One day during a game of Pall Mall, Selina loses and Cassidy tactfully points out how amiable and even-tempered she is, pointing to another one of the things on Mr. Malcolm's list. In the next scene, Julia, Selina, and Cassidy run into Selina's very talkative and tactless cousin, Gertie Covington. When Mr. Malcolm and Captain Ossory arrive as well, Julia quickly claims that Gertie is her own relation so that Mr. Malcolm is not put off by embarrassing relations, which is something Selina finds offensive. When Mr. Malcolm asks her to go riding with him, Selina almost declines when Julia jumps in and accepts for her. Julia later explains to Selina that she had claimed Covington as her own relation because one of the requirements is that the ladies' society must be genteel. The next day, Mr. Malcolm comments on how quiet Selina is being, mentioning he'd rather have a quiet companionship rather than people who prattle on like Gertie. This offends Selina and she is visibly upset. Malcolm apologizes to her, but says that there is a saying where he comes from, which says that when a man marries a woman, he is marrying all her family. He also mentions that this discussion is a moot point as he's not courting Miss Thistlethwaite. He then invites her and her parents to his house in Kent. And so we see Selina traveling with Julia and her parents to visit Malcolm's huge estate. There we meet Mr. Malcolm's mother, who is a woman of high class and genteel manners. She is not impressed by Selina's humble background, but being a good person at heart, accepts Selina as her son's choice and gives him her blessing. Julia decides that Mr. Malcolm is suitably in love with Selina and determines it is time for Selina to reject him. However, Selina says that she no longer wants to go forward with the plan as she believes Mr. Malcolm is honorable and had no intention of hurting Julia. The next scene shows us a masquerade ball being hosted by Mr. Malcolm, where he is completely enchanted by Selina, who had dressed up in a beautiful white costume. He tries to talk to her, but Julia's maid interrupts their dance, taking Selina away and locking her in a room. Julia, meanwhile, dressed up as Selina and asks Malcolm to meet her in the study. Malcolm arrives and proposes to Julia, mistaking her to be Selina, but as per her plan, Julia rejects him by handing him a list of her own and runs out. However, the real Selina frees herself and she and Captain Ossory find Julia as she's running upstairs while Malcolm catches up to them. The entire scheme is revealed as Julia blames Malcolm for publicly scorning her due to his cruel list and also lets the cat out of the bag, saying that Selina was part of it. Malcolm is hurt by this revelation and leaves, not giving Selina a chance to explain herself. She is also angry at Julia for locking her up and not telling Malcolm that she refused to carry out her plan. Julia is left guilty and upset for what she's done as Captain Ossory asks her if this is what she wanted. The following day, a now guilt-ridden Julia tries another scheme to reunite Malcolm and Selina, but is dissuaded by Ossory, who confesses he has fallen in love with her. Mr. Malcolm and Selina find themselves alone in the garden, and Mr. Malcolm accuses Selina of trying to trap him in an engagement. Infuriated, she wishes him luck with his list. Julia apologizes to Selina, and the two friends reconcile as Selina decides to leave for home. As she does, Mr. Malcolm's mother blames her son for Selina's departure, revealing that she was the one who plotted to have the two alone in the garden. Mr. Malcolm chases after Selina and gives her a new list of everything he is looking for in a wife, the sole line reading Selina Dalton. Selina finds herself getting emotional and accepts his proposal. The two of them share a kiss, and this is where the movie ends. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new movie recaps.